David was a whirlwind of energy, a spark plug in a 10-year-old body. His sandy hair was perpetually tousled, evidence of his constant motion. He lived in a small town, the kind where everyone knew everyone, and spent most of his days outside. His greatest love was baseball. He wasn't the biggest kid, but he was fast, a natural shortstop, and dreamed of playing for the Yankees someday. He practiced every afternoon in the empty lot behind his house, tirelessly throwing and catching, picturing himself making the game-winning play in the World Series. He lived with his mom, dad, and little sister, Sarah, in a cozy blue house with a big backyard perfect for summer barbecues and impromptu games of catch. His dad worked at the local factory, and his mom was a teacher at David's school. They were a happy family, always laughing and supporting each other. But lately, something wasn't quite right. David, usually the first one up and ready to go, had started dragging himself out of bed. He'd complain of feeling tired, even after a full night's sleep. He'd still tried to play baseball, but he couldn't run as fast, and his throws didn't have the same zip. He'd find himself sitting on the bench, watching his friends play, a strange weariness washing over him. His mom noticed him napping more often on the couch. He was losing his appetite, and his normally rosy cheeks were pale. He shrugged it off at first, blaming it on the summer heat, but deep down, he knew something was wrong. The endless energy that defined him was slowly fading, replaced by a persistent and unsettling fatigue. The fatigue worsened. One morning, David woke up with a high fever and a nosebleed that wouldn't stop. Panic etched on their faces, his parents rushed him to the doctor. The waiting room felt like an eternity. David, weak and scared, clung to his mother's hand. Finally, the doctor called them in. Dr. Miller, a kind-faced man with gentle eyes, examined David thoroughly. He ran some tests, his expression growing increasingly serious. The next few days were filled with more tests, more waiting, and a growing sense of dread. David's parents tried to remain optimistic, but the worry lines on their faces deepened with each passing hour. Then came the day they received the news. Dr. Miller sat them down in his office, his voice grave. "I'm very sorry to tell you this," he said, "but David has leukemia." The word hung in the air, heavy and cold. Leukemia. David's mom gasped, tears welling in her eyes. His dad's face paled. They had heard of leukemia, knew it was a serious disease, a type of cancer that attacked the blood. Dr. Miller explained that leukemia meant David's body was making abnormal white blood cells that crowded out the healthy ones, making him weak and susceptible to infections. He spoke of treatments, of chemotherapy and radiation, but the words seemed distant and unreal. All they could focus on was the fear that gripped their hearts, the unimaginable thought of losing their son. David, though confused by the medical terms, understood the gravity of the situation. He looked at his parents' faces and knew that his life had changed forever. The initial shock of the diagnosis gave way to a frantic search for solutions. David's parents refused to give up. They spent hours at the library, poring over medical journals and books, desperate for any information that could help their son. They talked to Dr. Miller, seeking his guidance and advice. Dr. Miller, though supportive, was realistic. He outlined the standard treatments: chemotherapy and radiation. These treatments could help, but they were harsh, with difficult side effects, and didn't always guarantee a cure. He also mentioned that there were some experimental treatments being developed at leading research hospitals, treatments that offered a new kind of hope. These new treatments, he explained, were still in their early stages. They were not widely available, and acceptance into a trial program was incredibly competitive. The hospitals were very selective, choosing only a few patients who met specific criteria. The biggest hurdle, however, was the cost. These experimental treatments were incredibly expensive, far beyond what David's family could afford. The factory job and teacher's salary simply wouldn't cover the medical bills, the travel expenses, and the potential long-term care. Despite the challenges, David's parents clung to this glimmer of hope. They saw it as their only chance, a possibility, however slim, to save their son's life. They decided to explore every avenue, to fight for David with every ounce of strength they possessed, even if it meant facing seemingly insurmountable obstacles. They started researching the experimental treatments, contacting hospitals, and trying to figure out how they could possibly afford such a costly endeavor. Days turned into weeks as David's parents tirelessly researched and made phone calls, but doors kept closing. The experimental treatment programs were full, the requirements too stringent, or the funding simply unavailable. Discouraged but not defeated, David's mom remembered a story she'd read about President Kennedy's compassion. An idea sparked. That evening, gathered around the kitchen table, they decided to write a letter. Not just any letter, but a heartfelt plea from David himself, explaining his situation and sharing his biggest dreams. David, though weak, eagerly participated. He carefully printed each word on a piece of lined paper, his brow furrowed in concentration. He wrote about his love for baseball, about his dream of playing shortstop for the Yankees. He wrote about his family, his friends, and the simple joys of life he feared he might lose. He explained his illness in simple terms, how the leukemia was making him tired and weak. He wrote about the experimental treatments, and how they were his only hope. His mom helped him phrase certain sentences, ensuring his message was clear and impactful. His dad helped him address the envelope correctly and find the address for the White House. It wasn't just a letter, it was a piece of David's heart, sent out into the world with a desperate hope that it would reach the right person. Finally, the letter was finished. David carefully folded it, placed it in the envelope, and sealed it with a kiss. He knew it was a long shot, but he couldn't shake the feeling that somehow, this letter could change everything. He trusted that the president, a man known for his kindness and strength, would understand his plea and find a way to help. Days turned into weeks. David continued to weaken, spending more time in bed. The family tried to keep their spirits up, but the silence in the house was often broken by quiet sobs. They tried not to talk about the letter, but it was always there, a silent hope hanging in the air. Meanwhile, in the bustling White House, mountains of mail arrived daily, each letter vying for the president's attention. Most were sorted and handled by staff, but occasionally, a letter would catch the eye of someone, a staffer with a keen sense for stories that mattered. One such letter, addressed in a child's shaky handwriting, landed on President Kennedy's desk. The return address was a small town he didn't recognize. Intrigued, he picked it up. He settled into his chair, the weight of the world momentarily forgotten, and carefully opened the envelope. As he read David's words, his heart was deeply touched. He saw in the letter not just a plea for help, but the vibrant spirit of a young boy clinging to life, a boy with big dreams and a love for baseball that resonated with him. He was particularly moved by David's description of his family, their unwavering love and support. He recognized the desperation in their situation, the impossible choice they faced. He imagined his own children, and a deep sense of empathy washed over him. When he finished reading, he sat in silence for a moment, the letter resting in his hands. He knew he couldn't ignore this plea. He knew he had to do something. He called his secretary. "Get me everything we have on experimental leukemia treatments," he said, his voice firm. "And find out everything you can about a young boy named David." The phone rang late one afternoon, startling the quiet house. David's mom answered, her voice cautious. "Hello? Good afternoon," a voice said on the other end. "This is a call from Mrs. Miller. This is President John F. Kennedy calling from the White House." David's mom nearly dropped the phone. She stammered, "President Kennedy? Is this really you?" The president chuckled warmly. "It is, Mrs. Miller. I received David's letter, and I wanted to reach out personally." She called David and his dad to the phone, their faces etched with disbelief. President Kennedy spoke to them with genuine warmth and concern. He told them how touched he was by David's story and how impressed he was by his courage. "I want you to know that I'm going to do everything I can to help David," he said. "I've already spoken to some of the leading doctors and researchers in the country. We're going to find a way to get him the best possible treatment." He explained that he was looking into the experimental treatments they had mentioned in the letter, and would be in touch soon with more details. He assured them that they weren't alone and that he would personally oversee the effort to help David. Before hanging up, he asked to speak to David directly. His mom held the phone to David's ear. "David," the president said, his voice kind and encouraging, "you keep fighting, son. You're a brave young man, and I believe in you. And remember, the Yankees need a good shortstop." David, tears streaming down his face, managed a weak, "Thank you, Mr. President." The call ended, leaving the family in stunned silence. The President of the United States had called them. He knew David's name. He promised to help. A wave of hope washed over them, stronger than anything they had felt in weeks. True to his word, President Kennedy immediately set things in motion. Within days, a team of medical experts, assembled at his direction, contacted David's family. They explained that David had been accepted into an experimental treatment program at a renowned hospital in New York City, a place known for its groundbreaking work in leukemia research. The news was overwhelming. David's parents were filled with a mixture of relief, gratitude, and nervous anticipation. The team handled every detail, from arranging travel to coordinating with the hospital staff. The president's intervention ensured that all the costs associated with the treatment, the hospital bills, the specialized medications, the travel and lodging expenses, would be fully covered. This removed an enormous burden from David's family, allowing them to focus solely on supporting David during his treatment. Suddenly, what had seemed like an impossible dream was now a reality. David was going to get the chance to fight, to receive the very best medical care available. A few days later, David, his mom, and his dad boarded a train to New York City. David looked out the window, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and excitement. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he also knew that he wasn't alone. He had his family, his doctors, and the President of the United States on his side. As the train pulled away from the station, he whispered to himself, "I'm going to beat this." He held onto the signed baseball card the President had sent, a symbol of hope and a promise of a brighter future. The hospital became David's new world. Gone were the baseball field and sunny afternoons. He was surrounded by doctors, nurses, and machines that beeped and whirred. The experimental treatments were intense, involving new drugs and procedures that pushed his body to its limits. There were days when he felt incredibly sick, when nausea and fatigue overwhelmed him. There were moments of fear and doubt, times when he wondered if he could keep going. But David never gave up. He faced each day with a quiet determination, drawing strength from the unwavering support of his family. His mom stayed by his side day and night, reading him stories, playing games, and simply holding his hand. His dad visited every weekend, bringing him news from home and reminding him of all the things he had to look forward to. Even his little sister, Sarah, would send him drawings and cards, filling his room with color and cheer. The medical team was equally supportive. Dr. Ramirez, the lead physician, was not only a brilliant scientist but also a compassionate caregiver. She explained every step of the treatment to David, answering his questions with patience and honesty. The nurses were kind and attentive, always ready with a smile and a comforting word. David found strength in their belief in him. He made friends with other kids in the hospital, sharing stories and offering each other encouragement. He learned to find joy in small moments, a funny movie, a phone call from a friend, a visit from a therapy dog. He clung to his dream of playing baseball, picturing himself back on the field, running and throwing with all his might. This dream, along with the love of his family and the support of his medical team, fueled his courageous fight against leukemia. He was a little boy facing a big battle, but he was not alone, and he was not giving up. Weeks turned into months, filled with ups and downs. But slowly, steadily, David began to show signs of improvement. The treatments were working. The doctors noticed positive changes in his blood counts. His energy levels started to increase. The nausea lessened, and his appetite returned. He started spending less time in bed and more time walking around the hospital ward. He even started practicing his baseball swing in his room, much to the amusement of the nurses. The color returned to his cheeks, and his eyes sparkled with renewed hope. Dr. Ramirez was cautiously optimistic. She explained to David and his family that while there was still a long way to go, the initial results were very encouraging. The experimental treatment was showing promise, and David's body was responding well. The news spread through the hospital, lifting the spirits of everyone who knew and loved David. His fellow patients celebrated his progress, drawing inspiration from his resilience. His family felt a surge of relief and gratitude, daring to believe that their nightmare might finally be coming to an end. David, though still weak, felt a newfound sense of strength. He could feel his body healing, his spirit soaring. He started making plans for the future, dreaming of the day he could finally leave the hospital and return home. He pictured himself back on the baseball field, playing with his friends, feeling the sun on his face and the wind in his hair. He knew the fight wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had a real chance to win. The treatments were working, and David was getting better. Hope had returned, brighter and stronger than ever before. One sunny afternoon, a flurry of activity erupted outside David's hospital room. Nurses bustled about, and security guards stood at attention. David, puzzled, watched from his bed. Then, Dr. Ramirez entered, her face beaming. "David," she said, "you have a very special visitor." The door swung open, and there he was, President John F. Kennedy. David's jaw dropped. He couldn't believe his eyes. The president, looking taller and more imposing in person than he did on television, walked into the room with a warm smile. "Hello, David," he said, extending his hand. "It's good to finally meet you." David shook his hand, speechless. President Kennedy sat down on the edge of his bed, pulling up a chair for himself. He had brought a gift, a baseball, signed by the entire Yankees team. David's eyes lit up. It was the most amazing thing he had ever seen. They talked for a long time. The president asked David about his treatment, about his family, and of course, about baseball. He listened intently as David described his dream of playing shortstop for the Yankees. He told David about his own love for sports, and the importance of never giving up, even when things get tough. He praised David for his courage and his positive attitude, telling him that he was an inspiration to the entire country. He also spoke with David's parents, thanking them for their strength and dedication. He assured them that he would continue to do everything in his power to support David's recovery. Before leaving, President Kennedy gave David a pat on the back. "You keep fighting, David," he said. "I have a feeling you're going to be just fine. And when you're back on that baseball field, I want to be there to see you play." The visit left David feeling energized and hopeful. The president's kindness and encouragement gave him a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that if the President of the United States believed in him, he could believe in himself too. The months that followed were a period of continued progress. David diligently followed his treatment plan, attending every appointment, taking every medication, and working hard to regain his strength. The doctors monitored his progress closely, running tests and adjusting his treatment as needed. Then, one day, Dr. Ramirez came into David's room with a smile that stretched from ear to ear. "David," she said, "I have some wonderful news. You're in remission." The word hung in the air, shimmering with hope and joy. Remission. It meant that the leukemia was under control, that the abnormal cells had disappeared from his blood. It meant that he was on the path to recovery. David's parents burst into tears of joy, hugging each other and David tightly. It was the moment they had been praying for, the culmination of months of fear, uncertainty, and unwavering hope. David, though still weak, felt a surge of energy. He had done it. He had fought the disease and won. He was going to live. As the weeks passed, David grew stronger every day. He started physical therapy to rebuild his muscles and regain his stamina. He began to eat more, savoring the taste of his favorite foods. He spent hours reading books, catching up on all the schoolwork he had missed. He was finally able to leave the hospital and return home. His little town welcomed him back with open arms. His friends threw him a party, complete with balloons, cake, and of course, a baseball game. David knew that he would need to continue to be monitored by his doctors for years to come, but he also knew that his future looked bright. He was alive, he was healthy, and he was ready to live his life to the fullest. The little boy who had once been so weak and sick was now a symbol of hope and resilience, a testament to the power of courage, love, and unwavering belief. Even after David returned home, the connection with President Kennedy remained strong. David and his family continued to exchange letters with the president, sharing updates on his progress and expressing their gratitude for his unwavering support. President Kennedy, in turn, wrote back, offering words of encouragement and celebrating David's milestones. He sent David a birthday card every year, always including a handwritten note filled with warmth and humor. David's family also received invitations to attend White House events, opportunities to meet the president and his family in person. These visits were always special, filled with laughter and genuine affection. David felt a deep connection to President Kennedy, viewing him not just as a leader but as a friend. One year, David was invited to throw out the first pitch at a Washington Senators baseball game. President Kennedy was there to cheer him on, sitting in the stands with a broad smile. It was a dream come true for David, a moment he would cherish forever. The friendship between David and President Kennedy extended beyond personal correspondence and visits. President Kennedy often mentioned David in his speeches, highlighting his courage and resilience as an example of the American spirit. He used David's story to inspire others to fight for what they believe in and to never give up hope, even in the face of adversity. Their unlikely friendship became a symbol of the power of compassion and the importance of connecting with others, regardless of their background or position. It showed that even the President of the United States could find time to care for a young boy in need, and that even a small act of kindness could have a profound impact on someone's life. President Kennedy's commitment to David's well-being was a reflection of his broader vision for a better America. He believed deeply in the power of government to improve people's lives, particularly in the areas of healthcare and scientific advancement. He championed initiatives to expand access to medical care for all Americans, regardless of their background or economic status. He understood that access to quality healthcare was a fundamental right, not a privilege. He also recognized the importance of investing in medical research, believing that scientific breakthroughs held the key to conquering diseases and improving the health of the nation. He pushed for increased funding for the National Institutes of Health, supporting research into cancer, heart disease, and other life-threatening illnesses. President Kennedy saw the potential of science and technology to transform society and improve the lives of ordinary people. He challenged the nation to reach for the stars, setting the ambitious goal of landing a man on the moon by the end of the decade. He inspired a generation to pursue careers in science and engineering, fostering a spirit of innovation and discovery. His actions on behalf of David were not an isolated incident, but rather an example of his deep-seated commitment to helping others and his unwavering belief in the power of medical advancements. David's story became intertwined with President Kennedy's legacy, a testament to his compassion and his vision for a healthier, more just, and more hopeful future for all Americans. He believed in the power of government to do good, and David's story was a powerful example of that belief in action. Years passed. David grew into a strong and healthy young man. He continued to play baseball, becoming a star shortstop for his high school team. He wasn't just good, he was exceptional, his skills honed by determination and a deep appreciation for the gift of life. He never forgot President Kennedy's kindness and support. He carried the signed baseball with him wherever he went, a constant reminder of the president's belief in him. David excelled in school, inspired by President Kennedy's emphasis on education and scientific achievement. He decided to pursue a career in medicine, wanting to give back to others what had been given to him. He dreamed of becoming a doctor, a researcher, someone who could help other children battling life-threatening illnesses. He went to college, then to medical school, working tirelessly to achieve his goals. He never forgot the doctors and nurses who had cared for him during his treatment, and he strived to emulate their compassion and expertise. He married his high school sweetheart, a kind and caring woman who had stood by him through thick and thin. They built a happy life together, filled with love, laughter, and a shared commitment to making the world a better place. David eventually became a leading oncologist, dedicating his life to finding cures for cancer. He never forgot the lessons he had learned during his own battle with leukemia, and he approached every patient with empathy, understanding, and unwavering hope. He often spoke about President Kennedy, sharing his story with his patients and colleagues. He wanted them to know that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope, and that even the smallest act of kindness can make a world of difference. David lived a full and happy life, forever grateful for the extraordinary kindness of President John F. Kennedy. David's story is a powerful reminder of the enduring strength of the human spirit and the extraordinary impact of compassion. It's a story about hope, even in the face of overwhelming odds, and about the importance of fighting for what you believe in. It shows us that even when faced with seemingly insurmountable challenges, we should never give up on our dreams, and we should always hold on to the hope that things can get better. David's unwavering belief in himself, combined with the love and support of his family and the kindness of strangers, helped him overcome a life-threatening illness and achieve his full potential. The story also highlights the profound impact that one person's compassion can have on the lives of others. President Kennedy's decision to take a personal interest in David's case transformed the lives of David and his family, providing them with access to the medical care they desperately needed and giving them the hope they needed to keep fighting. It shows us that even the smallest act of kindness can make a world of difference, and that we all have the power to make a positive impact on the lives of those around us. Finally, David's story underscores the importance of fighting for what you believe in. David and his family refused to accept defeat, even when faced with seemingly impossible obstacles. They wrote a letter to the president, they researched experimental treatments, and they never gave up on their hope that David could be cured. Their determination and perseverance ultimately paid off, demonstrating that when we stand up for what we believe in, we can achieve extraordinary things. David's story is an inspiration to us all, a reminder that we all have the power to make a difference in the world, and that we should never give up on the hope for a brighter future.